Hey guys, quick announcement before I start this video. If you want to place an order for a shirt, I'm not desperate, but a lot of people have been asking about shirts. I'm getting ready to place an order and I'm going to make the cutoff date December 10th. But if you want a shirt, here's what you do. Email me at weingartnerracing@gmail.com what your shirt size is and if you want it in gray or white, because they come either way. They're 30 bucks. And what'll happen is I'll email you an invoice, you pay it, and it goes from there. All right, sorry it took a little bit. To the video. Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing with another video. This one is about this LS3 Flowtech head. Now, most of the time I put out a video on Friday and on Sundays, but being that it was a holiday on yesterday, Thanksgiving, I really haven't had a whole lot of time to work with this, trying to get customer stuff done as well. So this one's going to probably drop tonight or Saturday, I hope. But there won't be another one on Sundays, what I'm trying to get at. But this one's probably the most in-depth video I've done as far as giving you everything. What you're looking at here is I've got all the clay entries on every one of the ports on this LS3 Flowtech head. This has been the Internet Ports Head videos. If you haven't watched them, there's like 10 of them now. And I am done with the porting as far as I'm going to go. From this point on, there's only one more thing I'm going to do, and I'll talk about that later on. But in this video, what you're going to see is I'm going to give you the flow numbers for each one of these ports, and there are 4. Just the intake ports, didn't mess with the exhaust if you haven't watched the others. I'm going to tell you what they flowed on both the 4155 and the 4030 bore. I know LS's are 4065, I just happen to have 4030. And I'm also going to give you all the measurements. So I'm going to tell you actually the area of each one of these ports and all throughout them, so you can do whatever you want with it. So I'm going to share that with you. I'd be happy to give all that information. You can do whatever you want. And you'll get to see the flow numbers and everything else from them because the head is done. And what I mean by that is this was the 55-degree port. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch that one. If you look at it, it looks horrible, but watch this. It still looks bad, but it's hard to see it from this side. But it's a perfect oval now. And it's hard to tell because it looks like that way, but it's actually a perfect oval, exactly the way it should be. Something like, kind of like this, the clay gets messed up. Perfect little oval. Not little, but perfect oval. I'm going to give you the measurements for that. This one, in case you're wondering, was what would happen if, so this was the most aggressive one. This one was a stock one. What if you were to port it yourself? There's still some dimples in here because that's the one used for the dimples. You could tell what parts didn't get really touched. I have already ported it in 40 grit. I did the burr finish, so you can get to see what happened whenever I went from the 40 grit to the burr finish as far as flow-wise went. Then this one, this is actually I'm pulling off the clay now, so you can see this. This is the smallest port. I dropped my clay. It is tiny. So this is the small one. People ask me that for the internet as well. I think you get a better view from that way. So you get a better view when I guess you go like that and kind of see them ovaled better. And the small square here. This one's super tiny. We're gonna get the measurements on that too. This last one is the 50-degree one. It's probably the one that's most messed up. Its design's horrible. I went too far in different directions. If you watch other videos, you know what I'm talking about. But I did add epoxy to it on the bottom as well. Pulling this off now. It has epoxy that's filled in, and I did something that one of my subscribers had recommended to try. He wanted to see what happened, and I did it with the epoxy here so I can show you that. It has to do with the short side. Now, every one of the chambers has also been done. So I finished the chambers so that they would be equal and be able to tell you the difference. So all that's done, and you're gonna get to see all that information in this video. This one may run long because depending on how much, I've got a ton of information, but how long you want to stick around to listen to it all on the flow numbers and stuff. It's a lot of information, measurements and all. Do what you want with it. It's up to you. Okay, let's get to these measurements. Here are the final measurements for the bowl and throat and for each one of these so you can kind of see. So we'll just start from the right. This was supposed to be the biggest. If you went all the way back to the first videos, people wanted the one to be huge. Well, this one was supposed to be the big one, and it is by far the biggest. Now, it has a 55-degree seat, which is the most aggressive. You probably would never run this on an engine anyway. I mean, not on an LS like this, unless it was like a truly high RPM deal, you might. I still hate the chamber for it. But in other words, what I'm trying to say, it's probably not ideal, but we used it for the test. Anyway, whenever you go to a steeper valve angle, or not valve angle, steeper seats, you can increase the throat, and people wanted a large throat, so it's 92.3%. The bowl, and by the way, the throat goes from here across, right? That's your throat. The bowl is actually down from where perpendicular to where your guide is. The bowl is 106.7%, in case you're wondering where that number comes from. The valve diameter for all of these is 2.165. And if you watched any of my videos, I'm a huge fan of putting a larger valve in a head. This head would be the exception to the rule. And the reason why is because if you watch the other videos as well, it's shrouded. It's so close to the chamber. Usually it's further away. These are not the case. This might be the one time where you could have put a smaller valve in and would have been better. Anyway, this is a news flash for some of you. Once a larger valve's been cut in, it's really hard to put a smaller valve in because your top angle would be all the way down here, and you wouldn't get your undercuts in because that material is already gone. So several people have asked for me to put one in, but it's physically impossible once it's been in. So there's that. The bowl is 106.7%, which is across here. Very large, nice port. This one was porting it the way I normally would, kinda. This has a 45-degree seat, so it's good for street use, but I call it my medium one. It's not the most aggressive 45, and it's definitely not my mildest. The throat came in 90.7%, which is reasonable, and the bowl is 104%. So mild size. You can take a picture, look at that if you like. All right. Also, you notice the bump's been removed and rounded around the spark plug. This one's actually the smallest port because the two things people asked for was the biggest port and the smallest port. This one's by far the smallest. This one's a 45-degree seat, but it's my hot one. It's the most aggressive 45-degree seat I have. The throat came in measuring 90.3%, and the bowl is a mere 100.3%. So it's much smaller than the other two. Matter of fact, the smallest one, period. You can get a better look at that. Now, you might say, why didn't you make this one smaller? Well, the reason why, and I've told this in another video, there's a bulge that's right here, and I left it in on this one. I took some of it off, but for the most part, it's in because I didn't want to make the bowl too large. I was doing what the people had asked. In reality, I don't like that bulge. I think it disrupts fuel, and it's probably not good for a live engine. However, I left part of it in on this one and didn't take out as much over here. So it's not perfectly smooth, but it's mostly gone, and I hardly removed any from this side just to keep the bowl small. This one's the 50-degree seat. So it's this one, that 50-degree, you can use both on street and strip. I've done both. I know of several people, at least one of them was a race to drag week, did 3 years and didn't bring the head back in. But when I have seen them for a refresh, the seat's fine. So that one to me has been okay. So I'm sure everybody's got different use for it. The throat's 91.3% and the bowl's 105%. This one is the only one where the guide was not cut down. I didn't feel like messing with it. This port's horrible because I went too far in one direction. And pretty much, to be honest with you, I just gave up on it. So there's that. There's the measurements for this. I'll start showing the others in just a second. Okay, here are the measurements on this end of the head so you can get a better idea. And there's a bunch of them, so bear with me. We'll start off with this one. This is the 55-degree seat. So each one's got a label in case you want to go back and see what's up. This is the oval one, as you could tell by me filling it in. So there's a couple measurements. First one's the short side to deck. That's SS stands for short side. Short side to deck height. So from the peak of the short side right here to the bottom of the deck here, measured 1.52 inches. The next one I took was from the opening, which is right here, to the deck. So you can think about how high that's raised. 1.637. Here are the areas. So the first one is this is the area over the apex of the short side, that area, 3.44. The pinch one is actually at the opening. So just letting you know, it's 3.41. Okay, that's supposed to be the big one. But if you look at this one, this is the stock one. I want you to understand this. I ported this, but I never really opened up this side. I didn't do this. This is how it came. That's why you still see the dimples. I'm not opening up this area, and if you ever get one of these heads to port, don't do this. You don't need to port this area here. It's already way too large, because look at it. We'll start off with the deck one, though, but we'll get to that in a minute. First off, the short side to deck, which is the apex to the deck, 1.316. So as you can tell, I've raised it up about 200 thousandths. Then we have opening the deck, which is from here to here, 1.33. As you can tell, I've raised it up quite a bit. Also, the roof came up too, though. All right, this is what I mean by area. The area over the short side, which I did open up a little bit because I want to make sure I get the air that way, kind of a compromise, although it's still pretty big, 3.55. The pinch, 3.30. That's bigger than, well, the pinch isn't bigger, but remember, this is raised up, so you got a raised up area here too. That's the reason why this one's bigger. This one's already big, and the area over the short side is pretty big too now. That was mostly because I had to take out the bowl. When you work that bowl that way on this side, because of that lump, well, it grows that way. Ideally, I wouldn't have had it that big. I think that's a little bit too big. But anyway, going on. This is actually my favorite port. If we look at this, the short side to deck is 1.671 or 9. Let me see. That's a 7. That's from this apex down to the deck, 1.671. So if you look even at this one, this is a 1.52. This one's almost raised up 200 thousandths from that. So that's pretty big. The opening's 1.895. That's from here to here, compared to the 1.637. Dramatically difference there. And it shows up in our areas. The area over the short side here is 2.85. The area at the pinch, which really is just the opening, 2.63. We'll talk about these pinch areas in just a minute, but yeah, small one. This is the 50 degree one. This was horrible. Now I've got some other stuff to show you. Short side to deck, 1.373. Short side to deck, short side to deck, 1.373. Opening to the deck, 1.635. Area over the short side, 3.31, because it's been filled in like it should be. And the pinch, because it got filled in here, 3 inches. The reason why this one's not very good, and this is what someone asked me to do, this is the short side. So you see this little angle here? This is where the valve job ends. And then it's got a little dip. It's really not really a dip, but it's slanted up, trying to get it to bring that slant all the way this way as possible. Just couldn't make it without really raising it. I didn't want to. The port wasn't already good anyway. So you got a little thing here. It looks like a little dip and comes up. This short side's just different than the rest. The others just are not that way. That's just an oddball thing I never do. But yeah, it's there. You'll see from the flow number some of the stuff. So we talk about our areas now at the pinch. This 2.63, the reason why I picked that is because that's the most common one I use for my Dragon Slayers for a small block Chevy. I know it typically on a 400 peaks about 7,000 RPM. So I know that this port would work for that. These other ones are just too big. 3 inch, maybe not. You can get a lot of RPM out of those for sure, but that port's just not very good. That's not too bad of a pinch. These other ones are pretty big. 3.3 is big. 3.41, even me filling it in is kind of big. Almost makes me wish I would have filled more of it in. However, I have to say, now that I've finished, this port is usable now. It wasn't before. When it didn't have the material in here, it was not usable. This thing if you had a 427, of course, why would you put an LS3 on it? If you had a 427, you could do something like this. This port right here would be pretty good. It's going to make some power at the higher RPMs, like above 8,000. You're going to have a champ. However, for most street stuff, and the ones that just turned 7,000, this thing is my most impressive. I have to say, I really like this. This one, this is how it would be if you just ported a stock head too. Well, it's not ideal, but it is what it is. It's better than what it was. But because part of the idea is, since the pinch is so big, if we make it move more air here, it'll pull more air through the pinch. Kinda. Anyway, there's those measurements. So now that you have those, now with all that in mind, and I do say everyone's done, and I wanted to point this out, that 40 grit, this is the only one that's burr, all the rest are 40 grit. And this is the only one that doesn't have epoxy in it. Every one of them I think you could use in some way. Like, how you might say, how could you use this? You could get a Holley high ram. You could raise its roof too and epoxy it, and you could make something to work with this. This is not unusable. This one, of course, you can. This one is the same situation. You'd have to add a lot of epoxy. You wouldn't have to worry about so much raising it, because you might have to weld on top of the high ram, or spacer plate. This one, you just fill in the floor. This one the same way. So every one of them, I think you could use. So I want to point that out first. They just have a far different use. You wouldn't use this small thing on something you're trying to turn 8,500 RPM. It'd be great until it gets to about 68, and then the power's going to start waning. This one is really good. So anyway, that's that. But let's look at the flow numbers because they're going to be kind of different. And I'm going to tell you this before I show them to you. I flowed each one of them on the Superflow with the 4155 bore. And then I flowed each one of them on the Sanyez on a 4030 bore. And the reason for that, I'll get to in a minute. One other note I forgot to mention because several people have asked, how does this height compare to an LS7? This right here is a stock GM LS7 head. I have it. It's short side, sorry, not short side, it's deck, so it's opening to the deck is 1.724. So if we compare that to these, that one's actually shorter, a lot shorter. This one's actually taller and shorter. So if you look at the LS7s, what I'm trying to get at, the port opening's higher. Now, also, its pinch area, which really isn't a pinch, just the opening, is 3.20 inches, which, if you look at that, it's smaller than this one. It's smaller than the LS3s. From this, at least the Flowtech one, right out of the box. So 3.2, it's bigger, smaller than that, bigger than that. So I probably should have put more epoxy in, but I'm just calling it done. This is not bad. Anyway, let's look at the numbers. Okay guys, here are the numbers. I'm sorry if the picture doesn't look as clear. I did want to go get a new printer, but it's Black Friday and I don't want no part of that. Anyway, let's show the numbers. And I want to get through this because this is going to be, this one kind of hurt. This right here that you see here, this is the 55-degree pour. This is where we're going to start. This right here is what you see is after I get done porting it. And I just put it on the Superflow. This is after filling it in. So with all the epoxy in, just that, I hadn't touched the chamber yet. So just putting the epoxy in, 395. Man, it was good. The low lifts weren't that great, kind of bummed me out there. But the numbers look not bad, 387. So if you looked at what it was before, it did lose some here, but the port itself probably lost 20, 30 cc's. Numbers were about the same. This is what kind of hurt. All I did was the chamber, what you see. This thing is so sensitive with this chamber. It's of all the ports, this one, you touch that chamber in any way, it's going to get mad at you. And it did. You could tell what the numbers did. So like it did come up at some points, but from 600 on, it lost. And the other thing is it was so unstable, you could take two readings and it wouldn't read the same. And you're like, oh, that's your bench. No. The Superflow, it's slower to respond, so I actually flowed it twice to see what would happen. All I did was take it off, put it back on. The numbers were close, as you could tell, but they changed a little, especially right there. And it's not the bench, it's the port. It's the stability of that port, something with the chamber there. It's because this bench takes so long to respond, it can be a little high or a little low, and that's what it's reading. I did flow in the Sanyez because I wanted to see what was going on. Because anyway, so there's that. But right after that, I put on the Sanyez, same flow fixture, and here's what you got. So bear with me as I show you this, right? Yeah, here. This is it. So you need to compare this one with this. And if you look at the numbers, they're really close. It's like a 130, that's lower, of course. But 206.7, 206, same. 270 to 270, real close. 322, 323, real close. 362, that's where it got off a little bit. And then it went 380 to, 378 to 380. So they're off a little, but for the most part, it's pretty close. Some areas it's more because this one will respond faster. As soon as if there's anything that causes that port to get unstable, it right away will correct at 28 inches. This one's still doing whatever it does. But the numbers for the most part are consistent. If you're wondering what this number is, this is before I filled it in. And this is the one you saw in the previous videos. So there's that. That's a 50-degree port, but there's one more thing with it. I flowed it back on the 4030 bore. So here we go. This was the 4155 bore on the Sanyez. 4030 bore. See what I mean? How bad it hurts it? We're talking like almost 40 CFM there. It just does not like the small bore. I'm keeping this numbers because we'll get to them in a minute. But I want to record everything on a 4030 and a 4155 on both benches. So there's that. The next one we're going to look at is going to be our 45 and with this burr finished one. And you get to see what the burr finish did, and we'll talk about that. Okay, this is the burr finish port, and I'm going to show you. This number, cylinder 8, was how I left it, which was the 40 grit finish that you saw in the previous video. This is what just the burr finish did. Now I want to point out, because I'm going to get a whole lot of hate mail on this deal. The burr finish, I'm just testing its airflow. I'm not worried about fuel flow or nothing else, just to show you. I'm not saying how it affects horsepower in any way. I've said before my opinions on the burr finish, and mine is, it doesn't matter if it's fuel injected or not. I always put a burr finish around where the seat ring is around the throat because it's a high velocity area. And when there is reversion, hopefully it'll pick it back up. I don't know that you need the burr the whole thing, but that's up to individual people. I'm definitely not getting an argument with that. However, if you think just because you're fuel injected, you don't need some kind of burr finish in there to atomize the fuel, I think you're missing the boat on that. Because even though you're spraying down here, and we like to think it goes in here, you can watch a reversion pulse push that fuel right on up. So let's say even if your injector worked in a perfect world, 100% happy, perfect world, that when it sprayed, somehow it magically atomized every drop of fuel that left. As soon as it hits the reverse pulse, any of it comes back through, it might come right out of suspension, and they do. So that stuff happens. And I'm sure they change the injector when it fires as far as the opening of the valve and that sort of thing. But we know that there's reversion. There's no that pushes fuel back up. There's no denying that. If you ever had a stock head that's been fuel injected, you ever take it off, you'll see where there's marks from like carbon built up from just that situation. And you know it's not in certain areas because the fuel's washing it away. So it does happen. Anyway, I don't want to get too far off on that, but I just want to show you strictly airflow, just strictly airflow, what it did with the flow numbers. So this is 40 grit, this is burr finish. So if you look, 40 grit's better, considerably better. Well, nope, right there at 8. The burr finish is better. Better on the 40 grit and better again. So if you're looking at strictly airflow, this is not horsepower. And if you're using, and I've said this before, this is flow bench stuff. This doesn't mean it's going to make more power. It's just a tool, how you use it, how you use it. But looking at strictly flow bench numbers, it flowed worse. So do what you want with it. I'm not saying one's better than the other. That's up to you. I hate those arguments. I'm just giving you information, do what you want with it. Anyway, that's that flow numbers. But I wanted to show you, because so far these are on a 4155 bore. And remember, this is how I would have ported it, you know, like it is. Here's what it did on the 4030. This is on the Sanya, so the numbers are a little bit different. But it made a pretty good drop. So as you can tell now at 400, it's, you know, 262 or 261, 600, 341. So that's not bad there. That's a good number at 6. And then 362 at peak. So not bad. Pretty good for a 4030 bore. That'll run for sure. But anyway, let's, and by the way, that's burr, that's this one here. So just giving you an idea. Okay. Next one is going to be the smallest port, and my happiest one. I truly love this one. But anyway, let me show you that numbers. Okay, here are the numbers from the smallest port that there is. Okay, really tiny. This is the super flow when it's on a 4155 bore. 266 at 4, which isn't bad. 345 at 6, not bad. And peak number of 378. And look, it never drops. On a 4155 bore, it never loses flow as the valve lift increases. This thing's great. I will say it is extremely loud because the velocities are way high. I know someone's like, why don't you put a velocity probe in there? If you know what it flows and you know the area, you'll know the velocity. Anyway, there's that on a 4155 bore. I then took it and put it on the Sanyas to see what it'd do on a 430 bore. So, by the way, typically the superflow is higher. It reads at least the same or higher. So just take that for what it's worth. This is a smaller bore anyway. This is a 430. As you can tell, the numbers dropped. I mean, you lost 20 CFM right there. So that sucked, you know. to lose that just because of the smaller bore. Now, some of you might be saying, well, what's it compare to this one? Because this is a small one, and this one's probably the next smallest. Well, kind of. How do they compare? This is kind of shocking. This is what I mean by the bore is telling you it's holding the port itself back. So this is this one, which I just talked about, the burr one, and then you have the small one. If you compare those numbers, and this is both on the 430, same bench. The bigger one's down, then it's slightly better, slightly better, slightly better, a little bit better for sure at 6. But look at 7, 331.6 to 331. Look at 8, 343, 342. I mean, they're almost the same, 340, 354, 354, and then 359 to a slightly more here. So this bigger port, it only slightly flows more than this one, and this one's at least 50 cc smaller. This thing will be just tearing. If you were to make a whole engine run with this one and with this one will destroy you. For most of the street guys, it will tear you up. Anyway, there's that one. We got one left, and that's this 50 degree, and then I can wrap up this video. This is the 50 degree port. So here you have this one. This one's, like I said, it's kind of an oddball. This is the 4155 bore on the Superflow. If you look at it, it actually has the highest of all of these. This one flows the highest at 400 valve lift, which is shocking because of the port itself. I can't stand it. It's hideous. But at 4, 278. At 6, you can see how bad. Remember, this is a 4155 bore, 333. And it starts picking up finally in the upper lifts at 373. But man, it's just not that great. Except it's slightly better on the, slightly on the, well, a lot actually. Say I flowed the same because it's so horrible. This is a 4030 bore on the Sanyas. If you look, yeah, it's down, which they all have been. But 333 at 6 to 3, they're almost the same because the port sucks. But anyway, that's its numbers. So I've shared every bit of information I have with you about these heads so far. I'm not going to CC them. I know someone's going to ask, can you CC them? No, I gave you the measurements. It's the best I'm going to do. Why don't you CC them? Well, that's easy. This 55 degree port is broke through at the top where the spring pocket is. I don't want to know what that leak. This one's the only one that doesn't have that. This one's also got it broke through there, and this one doesn't, but who cares? I don't want to mess with it. I've spent enough time with it. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did you flow all these on so many different boards? Well, one, I wanted to show you information, and two is because I'm getting ready to do this. If you watch my other videos, I told you I was going to do this. I'm getting ready to angle mill them. For those who don't know what angle milling is, we do a lot on the small block side of things, or used to. I haven't heard of any LS guys do it, and I don't blame them why they don't. But here's what happens. Essentially, whenever you surface a head, typically put it in perfectly flat as you can. And the mill or the cutter comes across and cuts the entire surface as it goes across, making it perfectly flat. When you angle mill, what you're essentially doing is instead of setting the head perfectly flat, parallel to the cutter, so if my cutter is perfectly straight this way, the head's parallel with it. Instead, we actually tilt the head, usually this way, where we bring this side up. So the cutter takes more off this side first, and it cuts it at an angle. So you can think of it, it's going to cut something like this. That's an extreme angle, but you get the idea. And why do we do that? Because when you cut, you're removing more of the chamber size. So what it's going to do is shrink the chamber, but it also alters the valve angle. Because this is a 15 degree valve angle, but that's the head, that's the valve guide here in relation to the deck. If I change the deck angle, the valve guide itself is going to roll with it. Now, honestly, you'd have to mill a ton to change the valve angle. Hardly any. You have to mill a bunch to make that valve angle change a bunch. How much am I going to take off? 200 thousandths. Would you ever do that on a real engine? No, that's a lot. But I'm going to do it just because, well, I know this head is never going on an engine, and I'm curious. Why go half measures? Go full measures. So that's what's going to end up doing, and that's the reason why I float on both the 4030 and 4155 bores, is we're going to see it's going to reduce the chamber size a bunch. Most of this will be gone. This curve here will be somewhere in here. The chamber will end up shrinking down. And we're going to see, well, did it help it at all on the smaller bore? Because in theory, this thing should shrink, but there's not a whole lot of bevel out, so I doubt it shrinks that much the way I need it to. Anyway, we're going to find out, though, because it is also, when I put that 4030 ring up here, you notice it blocks here. That part's going to be gone. So who knows? It might pick up flow. But that's the next thing that's going to happen with it. I have no idea when I'm going to get it done, and I'm just going to flow it exactly like it is. As far as port work thing on this, I am done. I'm not trying any other stuff. Which brings up the next point. Might as well start about it now. By the way, if you want to look at the short sides, there they are. Beautiful. Yep. Yep. Hideous. Anyway, this brings up the next thing I want to talk about. I will be doing another one of these internet ports heads, but it will not be an LS head. If you have something you would like to see done, doing the same type of testing procedures I've done with this one, put it in the comments. But I have a couple requirements. One, I have to have the flow plate for it. So don't say, I want some Subaru WRX. First off, I don't care about imports. Sorry, guys. I shouldn't say I don't care. I don't have the stuff to do it, and I'm just not involved in it. So you do your own thing, but I don't have any of the stuff to do it. It's got to be a head that's available. So in multiple castings. So it can't be, there's only one company that makes the head for yours. It's got to be something more available, like Brodix, AFR, Dart, whatever, Profiler or something. So in other words, at least 2 manufacturers has to make your head. And it has to be something that I can flow. And I can flow the Ford big block big blocks, like the 460 stuff. Can't do the FE stuff. 440 Mopar, any LS, and any Ford I can do, like Cleveland's and stuff. So if there's one that you want, what's going to happen is I'm probably going to auction off this head. And when actually more like a raffle, like $5 buys you the ticket, and I'll use the money from the tickets to buy the next head, and so on and so forth. So some lucky person will get this. I'd like to give it away, but look, I'm not making any money on this, and I literally spent 2 hours on flow bench just now. My electricity bill is going to be higher than Snoop Dogg before Thanksgiving. So anyway, there's that. Thanks for watching, and you guys take care.